Good morning and good afternoon across APAC. Thank you for joining Randstad Enterprise's first APAC Talent Navigator series of 2024, focused on our latest global in-demand skills research developed by the Global Talent Intelligence team that we released earlier this year. Just waiting a few more minutes, I can see attendees are logging in. I'd like to give you a background around the research. It provides rich data-backed insights from over 23 countries globally on the top in-demand skills and the market dynamics across 6 key dimensions. My name is Melanie Redshaw, and I'm the APAC Head of B2B Marketing at Randstad Enterprise, and I'm truly delighted that you're here to deep dive into the data with us, taking a proactive step towards building greater talent intelligence for your organization. Now, before we begin, I want to take a quick opportunity to cover a few housekeeping items. The first, at the bottom of your screen, there are multiple tools that you can use to engage with us throughout the webinar. If you have any questions that come to mind throughout, please submit them through the Q&A engagement tool, and we will reserve the time at the very end to answer as many as we can. To optimize your viewing experience to your preference, you are able to modify your interface. And if you have any technical issues, feel free to submit the issue into the Q&A, and we will be sure to address that. And as always, a recording of this event will be made available after the event concludes, and it can be accessed using the same link sent to you earlier, but it's also going to be available on our website. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Joining us, we have Joost Heins, our Global Head of Intelligence. We have Jatin Satija, the Head of Talent Intelligence for Asia Pacific. And we have Matt Górecki, Talent and Market Intelligence Manager. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us bright and early in Europe and in India. And now the mic and floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mel. I'm very happy to be here with you today. We're very excited to share our research with you, and we thought, well, let's dive straight into it today, and let's get the brain started. I wanted to ask you first to start thinking about, okay, if I want to hire junior AI talent, where is my best chance of getting the right male-female balance? So start thinking about that a little bit. Because this is one of the questions that you will be able to answer with our research. And we've picked out a couple of things to start the day with on things that surprised us a little bit. And I'll give you the answer now while you had a moment to think about that. It's actually in APAC that we see a higher representation of women in the talent pool for junior AI talent. And especially if we look at India and Australia, we see a much better representation than what we see on a global level. So that was the first brain teaser. I have 2 more. The next one is remote work, one of those hot topics that you see quite a lot in the media. And there's an interesting dynamic between what employers want and what talent really wants. Matt will talk, or Jatin will talk about that a little bit more. But if you think about the countries in the world where you expect to see more remote work being offered, where would you think will be a good place for that? While you have a moment to think about that, I'm going to share the results with you. It is actually in countries where traditionally the SSCs kind of started. So specifically Poland, Hungary, and Czechia, we see in the job ads that remote is much more common than in other places in the world. You see some other countries that also heavy on SSCs, but these are more the second generation of SSC countries. The first generation, like Poland, Hungary, and Czechia, you see a very high percentage of remote job offers. Then the last teaser for you today, and that is the hiring complexity. The title already gives it away, but like we looked at multiple skill clusters, and we found that actually audit and compliance is the one that has the fiercest competition. So that gives an interesting thought, because if you would have asked me up front, I would have said, well, probably AI will be up there. But it's actually audit and compliance where we see the fiercest competition for talent at this moment. Now, I hope this is a good intro to our research and gives you a little bit of a feeling of the things that we have seen in our research. And today we'll take you through a couple of things. First of all, I think it's always good to know what we're going to talk about today, right? And first of all, we want to talk about what is the research, what does it cover, what is new this year. We've been doing this for 4 years now, and we have seen some changes, and we made some changes ourselves. Second, we're going to go into, when we look at this amount of data, what are the things that stand out? What are the key highlights? Jatin will take us through that. And last but not least, Matt will take us through some practical use cases that you can use for yourself to go through our interactive dashboard and look at what is available and what you can play around with. So I'll start with the research. So in general, what is the research? What does it cover? So it covers 23 markets globally. And I think the interesting thing to think about here is it covers more than 130 million talent profiles that we've analyzed. So there are more than 130 million talent across the globe that fits the in-demand profile, and that is the profiles that we see that almost every enterprise is looking for, and where we see very fierce competition. We do that for 9 different skill clusters. Those 9 different skill clusters are built up over more than 70 skills, and we look at 6 different dimensions that I'll share as well. Now, the big difference this year compared to last year is that we have built an interactive dashboard. There is so much data that we thought it was much easier for you to navigate through it and find the things that you're looking for. If you can use your own mouse clicks to slice and dice the data as you like. So Matt will give you examples of that. Now, you might have already seen what are those skill clusters, and they're definitely areas that are no surprise, right? We'd already talked about audit and compliance. AI, it's all over the news, so there's no surprise that that is very high in demand for a lot of companies. And maybe more interesting that you still see customer service up there. It is definitely one of those areas that could have quite a big disruption from generative AI taking over. But right now, if you look at the job market, the number of job ads out there and the competition for customer service talent is still very, very fierce. And there is very limited impact of Gen AI in that area yet. So those are the skill clusters. As a reminder, they're built up over 70 skills underneath that make up all these skill clusters together. And we're going to look at 6 different dimensions. These are the dimensions that I think are very useful to evaluate how competitive are these markets, how expensive is talent, but also can you find the right male-female balance? Also, how do you handle remote versus hybrid working? How do you compare to market? And this year, fairly new, we have launched our human potential model. And in our human potential model, we give a framework of looking at skills a little bit differently. You know quite a bit probably about soft skills. We don't really like that term of soft skills. We prefer the core skills, because these are the skills that you're really made of. This is really what makes your personality. And when you look at what is often asked in job ads, you see that it's often mostly looking for what we call the learned skills. The skills that you are able to learn yourself, and according to the World Economic Forum, most skills can be learned in this category within 6 months. And so we want to make that distinction of who you are really as a person and what are your learned skills that you have built up on experience that you had either in life or in your working experience. And last but not least, anybody knows that motivations and aspirations are probably even more important, because if you have the right mix of core skills and the motivation of aspiration, there's any skill really that you can learn. So I think by distinguishing in that way, we hope that we give you also a framework of having a different look at skills, and also maybe reevaluate on how you look at the really hard to recruit for skills in your organization. Because you'll see some of these skills are very difficult to acquire from the market, but you might relook at your own talent to see if you can upskill or reskill people in your own organization that have the right inherent core skills and the right motivations and aspirations. All of this research you can find on our website. We'll share the link, of course. You might have already seen it. We have a executive summary where we go into our highlights from going through that 130 million profiles in those 9 skill clusters and over more than 5 million job ads that we analyzed, and also the interactive dashboard. So with that said, I wanted to hand it over to our talented Jatin, who's the face of our talent intelligence team in APAC. So Jatin, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Joost. Good morning, everyone. Over the course of next few minutes, I will essentially take you through some interesting insights across, and I'll be covering 4 major themes here. 1, complexity of hiring specific skills across the 9 skill cluster, which are the most complex skills to hire for and how do they differ by market. 2, hybrid and remote workforce. How is that evolving as a theme, and how that difference, how there is a difference clearly, right, in terms of which countries are more open and which countries are almost negligible in terms of hybrid and remote work openings. 3, how stable are the talent markets, and how is it panning out? Which are the most talent groups, which are the most open to taking up newer roles, and again, what's the variation at a country level across different regions? And finally, diversity for the 9 skill clusters that we've kind of covered in this research. Which cluster essentially offer the most balanced, gender diverse talent groups, and how is the differentiation, and who are the market leaders at a country level, right, in terms of offering a gender diverse workforce? Okay, before I kind of go into each of the themes one by one, I will be using a few terms over the next course of my conversation. One is supply. When we say supply, we essentially mean which are the total number of individuals that have a certain skill set and kind of a map to these in-demand skill clusters. We have managed to kind of gather this information by getting this information from leading job boards, professional network websites, and also we've kind of normalized this data with the government and the labor stats information at a country level to make sure that we are painting a very equitable and a representative picture of the size of the supply, talent supply in this case. Second, demand. By demand, we essentially mean how many job openings are essentially open, mapped to a certain skill set. Again, this is a number that we kind of come through by looking into leading job boards, government number, government data, as well as looking through professional network websites, right? And this covers all the 23 markets that we've covered in this research. And finally, JVR, or job vacancy rate, as we put it, it's an important statistic data point that is used across the globe to essentially measure how difficult or normal it is to hire for a certain skill set. For reference, the closer the JVR, or job vacancy rate, is to 1%, that is indicative of a standard or normal market conditions. The further we move away from 1%, or the higher the value, that basically it is indicative of a hiring complexity on the higher side. Okay, with that out, let's directly jump into the first theme, right? Which are the most difficult to hire skills, right? I think Joost already gave it away in that regards. It is no surprise, right, that AI ML is right on top. However, what is most surprising is that more than AI automation talent, it's the audit and compliance talent, right? That is super difficult to hire for, and that's closely followed by customer service as well, right? Again, very less talked about skills in general. And I'm talking about relative to how much we hear about AI and ML talent, But again, this is what data tells us, and that's why it's always important to take that into account, right? Whenever you go out and set expectation with your respective leaders, it's not just difficult to attract AI/ML talent, but audit and compliance is probably more difficult, and customer service, right, is where the most difficulty is. At a country level, which are some of the countries that essentially have offer the most difficult pool to hire from? And then right up there is Singapore and US, right? Some of the most developed markets in the world continue to face trends that make it difficult to attract talent. And again, it's audit and compliance, AI automation, customer service, and you can go through the entire list. At a most micro scale level, right? No wonder NLP, again, the sub skill that's linked to the skill cluster of AI/ML, is right up there. Robotics and QA, right? Again, these can be directly mapped to the top three skill clusters, which are most difficult to hire. As I said, right, Singapore and US are the most difficult hiring markets. But again, it's important to understand that this is relative, right? It's not at all to be said that probably the least complex markets like India, Spain, and Sweden, it's going to be a cakewalk. Not really. No, that's not really the case. But relative, right, to a US or a Singapore or a UK, the markets like India and Spain and Sweden offer a better probability of attracting talent and lower complexity in that regards. In general, if you look at it at a more regional level, right, Asia offers lower complexity in terms of attracting talent. But again, within Asia, I look at Asia with two lenses. One is the emerging Asia. What I mean by that is countries in the Southeast Asia, like Malaysia, Indonesia, and India in that regard. And then there's the more developed Asia, right? Which by that I mean Korea, as well as Taiwan, and to an extent China as well, right? So the emerging Asia is where it's relatively lesser complex to hire talent, but again it differs, right? When you want to attract senior talent, right, it's relatively more difficult as compared to the more junior talent. Okay, so that's again a take on how difficult and complex it is to hire for different skill clusters, and it varies by countries as well. Moving on to the next one, I think Joost already mentioned, right, that how we look at soft skills as the common term. We look at it as the core skills, right? We're seeing there is a clear increase in terms of demand from clients and on the newer jobs about people who need to have emotional intelligence, or how most of us know it as EQ, emotional quotient, and also learning, right? The two clear core skills that we are seeing an uptick in terms of requirement in most of the jobs. Similarly, I think this is almost like something that kind of really grew in popularity during the COVID time, right? The value of ownership, right? How much ownership you have on certain things that are kind of mapped to you that you have to take care of, and also how much you can drive it, right? Given the fact that especially when most of the world was in lockdown in COVID, it was completely ownership and drive that made sure that the work wheels were still moving and everything did not really come to a grinding halt. And finally, how candidates essentially are kind of looking at this, right? How aware are they that it's not just about knowing the technical skills, it's also about how strong essentially are at your core skills. I'll probably So again, that's the list, right? Ethical judgment, continuous learning, empathy. These are some of the top most competitive core skills that can always be valuable. And that's the trend that we have observed in our research as well. And emotional quotient is right up there in terms of in-demand core skill set. Right. Let me move to the second theme, hybrid and remote work adoption, right? How is that shaping up as a theme, and which countries essentially are leaders, and which are the ones that are hardly kind of moved back to majorly the back to work kind of a trend as we are kind of slowly observing it. Clearly, the Central European countries are the flag bearers, right? With Hungary, Poland, and kind of right up there in terms of the highest number of job openings in terms of that offer hybrid and remote work environment. However, the same can't be said for Asian countries, right? With Singapore and India kind of lagging. However, we've also seen that APAC overall as a region is starting to kind of move back to a majorly like work from office kind of a setup, and specification around remote and hybrid workforce is on the decline. It's very curious, to be honest, right? That especially with countries that probably lack the hard infrastructure, with over like 50 minutes or 1 hour time to reach office, are going back to this kind of a setup. And I'm personally very well aware of how it is in India in that regard, and many other emerging Asian countries, right? The hard infrastructure does not really exist to the extent in most European countries. But again, I think it's more to do with the cultural side of it, right? That people want their team to be in office and not really spend most of their time working remote or in a hybrid setup. What I will share next with you essentially also are a few data points that we gathered through a work monitor report that was published by the broader Randstad firm. That basically talks about, right, how important are people looking at flexibility and how is work, remote and hybrid work seen from an employee's point of view. You can clearly see, right, that a big chunk of talent still really values flexibility, and hybrid and remote work options are right up there. People are valuing a lot more of their personal life. Again, that's pretty much in the trend since COVID happened across the globe, and people are almost 50% of the folks we surveyed are ready to kind of quit their job, right, if it prevents them from enjoying their life, right. Again, it's an important indicator that hybrid and remote work option is an important lever if you really want to attract the talent, and not just attract talent but also retain them. Moving on, let me just shift gears and move to the next theme, right, around how stable are the markets looking when it comes to talent, right, and which are the talent markets that essentially have the highest risk in terms of job hopping. APAC as a region in general is right up there, and to be in fairness, I think it's also there's an undercurrent there that many markets in the APAC are continuing to see good growth, which is pretty much in contrast to how the Western markets are performing. And that basically means that that many more job openings have come up, and that basically is leading to people being open to taking up newer roles. If you see the top three countries, right, that essentially have the highest number of people who are flagging that they're open to take up new roles, India is right up there. No wonder India is seeing a strong economic growth, even in backdrop of a global slowdown. Similar is the case with Mexico. Again, an emerging market is seeing a reasonably good high GDP growth. And Malaysia, right, again in the emerging Asia bucket in that regard. However, that's the same cannot be said, right, for countries like Czech Republic or Czechia, evolved markets like UK and Norway, and developed countries like UK and Norway in that regard. And the same is with the broader Western European markets as well, right, wherein the talent markets are a lot more stable, and it's almost half, right, in terms of the size of people who are flagging that they'll be taking up a new job, probably in the coming short term. Before I conclude this theme, right, it's important to understand, right, what are the motivations, right, for this talent group when they say that they're open to taking up newer roles. Work-life balance, right, it's again a kind of pretty much a precursor of what I already talked about, right, in my last theme. Work-life balance and a higher pay continue to be the biggest motivations, and let me talk about that on the next page. Right. Again, this is an important data point that kind of came through our work monitor report, right? That one of the biggest reasons why people are looking to change jobs is work-life balance and pay. We asked the people who we surveyed, right, that would they accept a job if, and they said if they did not really offer them a significant, they would not do that. And again, if it almost 50%, more than 50% of them said that if it negatively impacts their work-life balance, they would rather not accept that job offer. Again, it's important to understand when we asked, right, the people we surveyed, the core group, that which are the most important motivations. Pay and work-life balance are right up there, and it's important to understand that pay and work-life balance should be right on top of your discussions when you have it with your TA leaders on what can make it relatively easier to go out and attract talent. And again, hybrid and remote workforce opportunity is one of the probably options, right, that feeds into the same thing. Again, these are some more important numbers, right, that came up. 50% say that they would rather stay in their role, even if there's no room for career progression. Again, very counterintuitive, right? The general perception is people always want to move up and take up higher roles. However, 50% of people we surveyed said that they would rather continue to work, right, if there is no career progression also, as long as they're happy, right? Again, something that should be taken into account. And again, almost 40%, right, said that they would do not really want a career progression as long as they're happy at the same level, right? Again, the days of up and out do not really always apply at an equal level across industries. But again, these are very broad market level data points. These will differ when we look at specific sectors per se, right? And finally, moving to the final and the thing that I love the most, right? Diversity. Of the 9 skill clusters, right, that we researched, which are the skill clusters that essentially have the highest balance in terms of gender diverse talent, and how does it vary, right, by different countries? Which countries are leaders in terms of offering gender diverse workforce? You can clearly see, right, customer service and probably marketing and finance and accounting offer the most balance. Again, it's not a 50-50, but again, they still offer the most balanced data in terms of providing workforce on the female side. However, the same can't be said, right, when we look at technical skills like from the AI automation space, cloud, it is pretty much a laggard, and the same is in the engineering and the maintenance service, right? Why this data point is super important in my read? When I know most of us have very good. Basically, diversity is a topic that's right up there when you have those discussions with your leaders and even at a board level. However, it's important to understand what's the low-hanging fruit, right? What can be achieved, and which are the definite function groups that you should basically go after and target a higher number of diverse talent, especially on the gender diversity side. If you want to basically look for cloud engineers, right, it's good to take into account and set expectations that will be the most difficult, right, as compared to probably looking at a marketing and a customer service talent professional. Switching gears at a country level, right, Romania offers the most diverse, right, gender diverse talent workforce when it comes to that, and Italy is probably at the bottom in that regard. However, these are, again, we're talking about the top 5 markets only. It kind of gets worse when you move down the ladder. So Romania, Singapore, and across APAC, and Australia, essentially, again, the broader APAC region, offer the most gender diverse talent groups in the APAC region. Romania, again, is a clear leader, and Italy in the EMEA as well. Again, just a recap, we kind of talked about 4 broad themes, right, and the insights that I shared with you. One, how difficult it is to hire across different skill clusters. 2, how is remote and hybrid workforce opportunities shaping up as a theme across 23 markets that we studied. How stable are the talent markets, right? And which are the markets which are essentially leading in that space? How high risk talent it's there, right, in some of the markets. And finally, diversity, right? Which skill clusters have the highest gender diverse talent groups, and which countries essentially are leaders in this space. With that, I conclude majorly most of the insights. Let me pass it down to Matt, right, who is not just a subject matter expert in regards to our in-demand skills research, but also leads global intelligence delivery. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you very much, Jatin, and hello, everyone. Really appreciate you being here. I do truly believe that in-demand research is basically the only tool in its class in a way that you can access that directly without any sort of paywalls, and it can be leveraged for both by both leaders as well as the recruitment teams. And I really want to take you to the practical side of the things, right? So we did prepare 3 use cases, which are around building your location strategy or executing your location strategy using some of the insights from the in-demand, as well as evaluation of the skills within the particular clusters, and I'll look into the diversity end of things. So without further ado, I'll start sharing my screen and the actual dashboard. And hopefully all of you can see that by now. So this is the page that all of you are able to access, right? We have, on this page, we can also find the definitions of what in-demand is. I'll get back to the interactive visuals, but we can also find the executive summary being here, as well as what areas it covers and what each individual point of the dashboard really means and what is it really based on, right? So taking in consideration what I've said about the location selection, right, the location strategy, the in-demand covers multiple geographies also in APAC. And this chart on the front end of the dashboard gives you an ability of switching between different locations. And then by navigating those fields up here, as well as those bubbles on the chart, you can find how complex the skills are to recruit. And basically, the further right there are, the more complex to recruit the particular skills are. This is JVR, as Jatin defined it before. And this is the amount of demand for the particular skill. Now, this is a representation of the sub-skills from within the core skill clusters, which means it goes into a little bit more depth within each of those categories. So I want to give you an example of opening a center in Singapore. Let's say you made a decision about bringing AI and automation hub into the local area, right? So by navigating this dashboard, I can actually select the skill cluster of AI. I did select Singapore in here, and I can see what sort of skills and what sort of complexity is actually being represented by the local market. As you can see, robotics basically is through the roof in terms of the demand versus the local available supply of talent. I also have a couple of core skills in a way of key skills for the skill cluster, and I can see where they are in terms of the local demand and the JVR, the hiring complexity. Now, with that in mind, right, if I'm having hard times recruiting this talent, which I likely do considering where robotics is, or how well talent represents the ethic and compliance skills, I might be looking into the areas around Singapore. This leveraging the global strategy is one of the key points of why in-demand is even there, right? You can navigate in between the different geographies and try to make up for the talent shortages or the complexities on a local level. So let's assume I'll go to India, right? And what you can see in here is actually slight shift of how those skills are positioned, where they are in terms of the complexity. You look at the ethics and compliance, right? And it's pretty much at the right end of things, being relatively complex. However, it's still lower complexity than in Singapore. What that really means is there's abundance of talent representing those skill sets, and at the same time, the demand isn't really catching up that much with the talent. So there's less competition on the market. Therefore, you would have much bigger chance of getting talent from India whenever you open the center in Singapore. If you were to adapt the remote working mode, that's one of the things that you might actually consider, also from the perspective of the attractiveness of the job. Now, with that in mind, right, if you look at the robotics skill cluster, right now it's at somewhere around 8%, right, a little bit over the 7%. So that's basically twice as easy to hire this talent, even though it's still relatively complex, but you would have much easier time just recruiting in India. The same goes for natural language processing. If you paid attention to the natural language processing position in Singapore, that was at about 8%, right? Here we have it somewhere in between 3.5 and 4%, which means this is also like twice as easy to recruit this type of talent. So leveraging this knowledge, I'm actually able to tell where I should drive my recruitment efforts and where should I actually be thinking about getting the talent from. And you obviously can I would say spread that across the regions. Whenever you're deciding to make centering the APAC region, you can look up how it really differentiates across all those different neighboring countries, right? You look at Malaysia, here you effectively can see the technical skills are being more on the hard side of things, but at the same time ethics and compliance, which I would say are quite native to Malaysia's market in terms of the amount of SSCs sort of providing this type of service being there, you can actually see that those skills still within the AI cluster, right? So relevant for this type of talent are much easier accessible. So if you're doing if your direction is actually get the talent that will deal with the compliance part of it alongside the technical bits, that's the direction to go. So that is basically a conclusion of I would say the first case, and I will show you how to navigate the details around the detailed skill dissection, so to say, or how to really identify what those skills are. Whenever you use this switch, you can go to each of those skill clusters and find out what obviously what the summary for the cluster is. What have we really thought about the AI? Why did it make its place to in-demand skills as one of the skill clusters? And then you can go to the composition of the skill cluster. So it's been basically spread into those three categories, right? The core skills, which effectively relates to who those people really are, what sort of innate abilities they should have. And this is really important element for anyone that's hiring and that's facing the niche and basically problems with acquiring the skills from the market. I would say I'd be very much likely to hire a person with right predispositions and ability to learn the skills rather than only with the skills, right? So it's pretty important element alongside the motivations which effectively drive those people. This is something that should play a more important role in the future of hiring as well as assessing the talent. Now, the sub skills are the learned skills, the skills that you do you do learn, and those are the key elements that create the overall skill cluster. And with that in mind, you're able to navigate through the page and find out, first of all, how the skill availability looks for the skill cluster from each individual country level, right? This is a map. You can basically zoom in and around on what's interesting for you. Obviously, countries like US will usually still the number of the talent available, or India, for example. However, you can also differentiate that into the different skill types. What particular skill sets are there? Those are still relatively high level, but then it sort of diverges the talent into the categories that you might find interesting or your recruitment teams might find interesting. This is one of the things that you effectively are able to leverage to plan around your individual functions. And with that, you can also select the particular markets that you might be interested in, right? Singapore is a relatively small market, so you won't see those numbers being tremendously high. But what you can see here, for example, is that the knowledge of automation tools and platforms, something that's been more popular and for the longer period of time, is relatively high comparatively to the other skills. But then AI infrastructure and tools, which is basically a making factor of those key professionals that build it, is relatively low, right? It's below 1,000 people. Whenever you look at the composition of those skill clusters, every single of those is split into the categories that enable you to make the decisions around those key elements that the role should possess. And with that, you can also filter through the active talent, which is mostly I would say the activity of the talent out there. If somebody basically is open for switching a job, basically by updating their CV in the latest 6 months, or strictly declares and applies for different roles out there on the job boards, you would actually be able to see, okay, this is this group that I will initially have easier time approaching. This gives you an idea about what chances I have of reaching out the talent first before I have to make a little bit more advanced efforts in terms of approaching them. And with that, you can also see the preferred employment type, right? Whenever the talent is contract, more of a freelance level, or the perm. So this is sort of reflecting on the pool structure. And again, you can navigate through each of the countries here, right? You can see the different perception of the talent, what is preferred by each individual country, and this will change accordingly, giving you ability to plan around the structure of your talent pool. Moving forward, we obviously have some insights on each of the skill cluster, which are not exhaustive, but effectively do cover the key points that we have seen happening for this part of the talent cluster. And the thing I find, I would say, most interesting in terms of navigating around what should I really pay attention to in terms of in what country I might want to upskill people into certain directions because skills are harder to acquire, to what countries I might go to face less competition than I'm facing right now. This is the demand view. So demand view is effectively split into two categories. It's showing you straight out the demand for the skill clusters, which means it's a composition of those different skills, as well as the individual number of advertisements that mentioned particular skills. So sort of a popularity of the skill in the region based on the employer's demand. And then you have the job vacancy rate. You have job vacancy rate that's strictly dedicated to the complexity of hiring, which is the balance of the demand and supply. And as I did already mention, right, you can see those skills for the AI cluster on a global level. And let's say we go to Singapore right now. Singapore is one of the most complex hiring markets out there. And you can see robotics is almost at 19%. We have computer vision being the lowest, but still relatively high end. Now, and pay attention to this number. It's 8%, 8.8% for the overall skill cluster, right? And then I switch to India, and the overall complexity of hiring goes to almost the normal market level, which means hiring for this talent in India is easier. Why is it easier? There's much more supply in India, but at the same time, the demand is not as high or is being driven by countries like US or Singapore in this instance. So you can see that I'll have much easier time hiring talent from robotics. I'll have relatively easy time hiring people from computer vision. Nevertheless, this is one dimension of things. I definitely want to highlight that whenever you think of those small data points that we did mention previously, whether it comes to seniority of the talent on the markets or some specific indications that might work out with your particular job description, that the skills you're looking for exactly. This is something that we can help you out with if you reach out to us using the thing at the very bottom of the page saying contact us, right? It's one of the things that we can really help you dissect into further level of detail. And just considering what I've said around the overall demands and the structure of this, I want to move to the third case, which is related to the diversity. Now, APAC, again, I find it relatively interesting in terms of how APAC is really future-proofing itself from the diversity perspective. Whenever you look at the general complexity of things on a global level, you can see that the Western markets have more of a traditional diversity share. So I'm skipping over the salary chart. This is relatively self-explanatory. I'll come back to that. And I'm going to the gender diversity part. Whenever you look at the gender diversity from APAC perspective, it's actually winning over in terms of the balance. You have a lot of talent that's joined the new technologies. For India or Australia specifically, it's 44% of female talent that joins the AI because of the perspective of growth, development, and obviously the salary that kind of comes along with the new tech. Whenever you go west, you can see those trends changing slightly. In this particular case, right, I also have to be aware how progressive the country is and where we actually are at the moment. So I'm looking at the global level. I can see the split being 21% female talent, declarative female talent on a global level. If I go to India, and that's overall talent, that's not specifically on the junior talent, I see a little bit more or things moving a little bit more in favor of the female talent. Now, if I go to Singapore, right, the numbers grow even further. So that means technically, at this point that is right now, Singapore is being more diverse market from an overall perspective of the skill cluster, so all the talents that can work in there, as well as from the perspective of each individual skill set that the talent possesses. Now, you have to be mindful that absolute numbers for this will be in favor of India because it's just a bigger country. There's more talent there. But whenever it comes to the balance ratio in the country, you can expect much more diversity from Singapore. So, for example, if I go to Australia, right, I can see those ratios dropping even further down. It's actually below the global average. And if you're wondering why those numbers are like mostly 23%, why this is 19%, the skill cluster is composed of all those sub-skills, right? So it's basically what's giving you ability to navigate in between. And concluding with that, I really want to show you two last things in regards to that are applicable to all those three cases that I did mention, which in particular is the salary. It's a guide on a skill cluster level, so it's relatively broad, but you can navigate in between different countries and what you can really expect. Obviously, as you start dipping into the skills, it changes. This is something that we could also potentially help you out in the consultation. However, I think the most important part in regards to all those cases, and also something that Jatin spoke about, whenever you're trying to get the talent from a different region, different country, figure out what might be attractive for them is the remote and hybrid part. When you look at this from the perspective of the global, what you can see is the supply preferences, what talents say they want in terms of the working mode. The light blue is the fully remote, the dark blue is hybrid, and the same applies in here. The light green is fully remote, the dark green is hybrid, and it's on the demand end. So that means whenever you go through advertisement, that's the percentage, the share of advertisement for either the whole skill cluster or the individual skills that lets you navigate through what employers are doing on the market and how employees perceive the markets. And with that said, I'll go to Singapore. This is a relatively small area, right? So you don't really expect a lot of people having ability to work remotely. So the adverts are more into the hybrids end. Whenever you look at the talent preferences, there's still a lot of people that wouldn't rather go to the office, and they would either use the remote option or the hybrid option. Now, whenever you switch over to India, you find out that this sort of shifts. Those are still not the Western levels. Again, CEs have well over 20% in terms of the fully remote and then hybrid. But at the same time, you can see there's much more talent, much more adverts in India that do give you the ability to work remotely or in a hybrid mode. There's less hybrid there, mostly because India is also used for the perspective of let's get the talent from India to work for example, Singapore. And in this particular case, you can also use this and this particular chart as one of the attraction factors. It's one of the things that might actually help you out to navigate and direct to the right talent with the right skills, with the right hiring offer. As you've seen, there was a little bit over 30% of people that wouldn't even consider changing jobs if there was no remote option. And I know that might be problematic for us as employers at some point, because there are different shifts in this area. Nevertheless, we have to be responsive to the market and kind of making sure that we're able to navigate across this landscape. So with that said, you've seen I would say the majority of the functionalities of the dashboard. You can use that yourself to navigate and sort of cross-cut the data any way you want. It's all open data, so you can find out about more specific cases specific to your business on your own, as well as ask us for particular support whenever you have questions on a deeper level. And with that, I'll move to the Melanie. So Melanie, would you mind? Thank you all.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for that demo. Thanks, everyone. Moving on to the Q&A now. Now is a great opportunity that if you have any questions, to please pop them into the question box. We do have one here that I'd love to ask ask you three, and maybe this question is more for Joost. We talk a lot about decoupling or onshoring, many times incentivized by policymakers as well. Do you see this as a long-term trend, Joost, further fueling talent scarcity, or is this a short-term change in direction? And will offshoring remain a long-term approach for global organizations?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see the dynamic around this. So yes, there for sure is more offshoring, but traditionally offshoring was more in the areas of production or very factories, that kind of things. What we see now is that the offshoring is more in the white collar talent, and it is more agile. So I think what is interesting is that there's a lot of like reshoring as well when it comes to the production areas or close to home for some North Americans. We see a lot of jobs moving to Mexico as an example. But on a kind of like traditionally headquarter functions, you see more offshoring happening. So, for example, finance or digital skills. A lot of them you see India coming up, the amount of shared services that are opened up there on a weekly basis are amazing. So yes, we do see that shift happening. And of course, that has an impact on what talent scarcity will look like in the future. And also around like, how do you stay attractive as an employer in these areas? Because you see that remote work is preferred by, or at least flexibility in work is preferred by talent. And it's an ongoing area of evaluation for any company to stay very attractive and to stay agile and to see where you're best placed to acquire and retain talent.
That's a good point. We have another question that's come through. As an HR talent or talent acquisition leader, we're continuously striving to maintain a balance between meeting short-term goals while taking strides towards achieving long-term organizational strategy. So how can talent intelligence like this help to achieve the same? Jatin, maybe this question you can take?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Great question, firstly. So there are many ways, right, how in which talent intelligence can essentially help both achieving your short-term goals and also kind of moving towards the long-term strategy of the organization. But let me give you one each for both the situations, right? In terms of when we say short-term, I think talent intelligence can really be helpful to help identify what I call the low-hanging fruit, right? What do I mean by that? Essentially, which talent group to go after, which companies to go after, right? And which location essentially to have your talent based in, right? So it's super helpful, and talent intelligence can help you navigate, right, to the right shore, as I usually put it, right? Because we essentially position ourselves as a lighthouse. So which is the low-hanging fruit? You can easily kind of be there and identify that with the help of talent intelligence. For the long term, right, it's very important, right, to set expectations, right, both with your accounts as well as your leaders, right. In that regard, again, talent intelligence can be super helpful. A case in point being, most of the organizations have really strong diversity aspirations in the long term. However, it's important to set expectations, right. For example, I think I already mentioned that to the course of the presentation, right? If you really want to build your diverse, gender diverse talent, you have to look beyond just one skill cluster, right? You cannot be expecting to probably hire 70% female cloud engineers because the talent just does not exist, right? So in terms of long-term goals, talent intelligence can really be helpful to give you those data points to set expectations with your leaders respectfully. So short term, identify the low-hanging fruit. Long term, set expectations, data point to set expectation with your leaders. Hope that answers.
Thank you, Jatin. Now we're coming to the end of the webinar. So if there is a burning question, please do submit that in the Q&A in the Q&A box. Granted, this session was so data rich and a lot of ground covered. We know that the research has so many insightful but complex findings, and so if there is an interest to visit our site and request a consultation with the talent intelligence team, please do visit at www.randstadenterprise.com, and you'll be able to see the dashboard and then request a consultation. At this point, we don't have any more questions come through, but I want to thank all of our participants once again, and to those of you that celebrate the Lunar New Year across the region, wishing you also a blessed and prosperous Year of the Dragon. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joost, Jatin, and Matt.
Thank you, everyone.